The October 2023 conflict between Israel and Hamas marks the most significant escalation of the ongoing Israel-Palestinian conflict in several decades. Hamas on October 7 started Operation Al-Aqsa Storm, which in turn was responded by the Israel with Operation codenamed Iron Swords. In this interactive exploration, we will look at the past and the present, shedding light on the complexities that have defined this ongoing Israel-Palestinian struggle, or more broadly, the Israel-Arab conflict. To understand how we got here, the road to 1948, wherein understanding the precursors to the modern Israel-Palestinian conflict becomes necessary. The struggle between the Arabs and the Jews over ownership of the Holy Land in Palestine dates back to more than a century and has given rise to several wars. The Arabs and the Jews living in Palestine were ruled by the Ottoman Empire until the end of the World War I. During the World War I, however, the Ottoman Empire got disintegrated. Subsequently, the Spike-Picot Agreement for dismemberment of the Ottoman Empire in 1916 led to the division of Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and the Palestine into various French and British administered areas called mandates. Under this, Syria and Lebanon became French mandates, while Palestine, Transjordan, and Iraq became mandates of Britain. All of these mandated territories, whose independence was provisionally recognized, became fully independent states, with the exception of Palestine, where instead of being limited to the rendering of administrative assistance and advice, the mandate had as a primary aim the implementation of the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration by Britain in 1917, as part of its mandate over Palestine, pledged its support for a Jewish national home in Palestine. The international sanction for Britain to implement the Balfour Declaration's policy in Palestine had formally been derived from the League of Nations. With this declaration, large-scale immigration by Jews had started soon after the war ended and had already led to a violent opposition by Palestinians in 1920 and 21. Further, the start of the notorious Nazi persecution of Jews in Europe resulted in migration of large number of European Jews into Palestine. Throughout the period of mandate, Palestinian resentment against the denial of right of national self-determination was observed in the form of revolts and riots. After the end of the Second World War, in February 1947, the British government decided to place the Palestinian question before the United Nations. Later, in 1947, the UN adopted Resolution 181, also known as the Partition Plan, which sought to divide the British Mandate of Palestine into Arab and Jewish states. However, many Arab states, including Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Lebanon, among others, voted against this partition plan. In May 1948, Britain ended its mandate over Palestine, and subsequently, Israel declared its independence. This brings us to the story beyond 1948, wherein we will look at the complex trajectory of the Israel-Palestine dispute. Beyond 1948, the Israel-Palestine conflict has continued to evolve, marked by a series of tumultuous events and conflicts that have shaped the region's history. The declaration of the State of Israel sparked the first Arab-Israel conflict when 5 Arab nations invaded Israel. The war ended in 1949 with a separate arms-ties agreement between Israel and its neighbors. But around 750,000 Palestinians were displaced and the territory was divided into 3 parts: the State of Israel, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip. In 1956, the second Arab-Israel conflict happened in the backdrop of Suez Crisis and the Israel's invasion of Sinai Peninsula. The Suez Crisis of 1956 precipitated when the Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal. Prior to that, the canal had been owned by the Suez Canal Company, which was controlled by the French and British interest. Owing to the strategic significance of Suez Canal, Britain and France sought to regain control of the canal through diplomatic and military action, for which they found a ready ally in Israel. It was resolved after the creation of UN Emergency Force by the UN General Assembly in November 1956. Later, Egypt was granted ownership and sovereignty of the Suez Canal, and it was reopened in April 1956. The Six-Day War in 1967 started when Israel preemptively attacked Egyptian and Syrian air forces. After the war, Israel gained territorial control over the Sinai Peninsula and the Gaza Strip from Egypt, the West Bank and the East Jerusalem from Jordan, and the Golan Heights from Syria. In 1973, the Yom Kippur War, also known as the October War or the Ramadan War, started when Egypt and Syria launched a surprise two-front attack on Israel to regain its lost territory. The conflict did not result in any significant gains for Egypt, Israel, or Syria. But the Egyptian president declared the war a victory for Egypt as it allowed Egypt and Syria to negotiate over previously ceded territory. The recent escalation of the conflict also marks the 50th year of the Yom Kippur War, which started on October 6, 1973. During the Cold War era, the Arab-Israel conflict became entangled in global rivalry of the US and Soviet Union. There were several near confrontations between the superpowers, and as a result, some important opportunities to reach a comprehensive settlement of the Arab-Israel conflict were permanently lost. Amidst this, there have been international diplomacy at work, with various strategies for resolving the Israel-Palestine tensions taking shape in the past. Amidst the ongoing tension, the international diplomatic efforts have played a pivotal role in attempting to resolve the Arab-Israel conflict. These efforts have led to the groundwork for various agreements and accords aimed at establishing peace and the stability in the region. First such major effort was the Camp David Accords of 1978, signed between the Israel and Egypt, brokered by the US. It was the first peace treaty between Israel and any other Arab state. Under this, Israel agreed to withdraw from Sinai Peninsula and Egypt recognized the State of Israel. It also charted out a framework for peace in the Middle East. Though it improved relations between Israel and its neighbors, the question of Palestinian self-determination and self-governance remained unresolved. The next major advance in the West Asian peace negotiations occurred in 1993, when the Oslo Accords were signed by Israel and the Palestinian Liberation Organization. It provided a framework for Palestinians to govern themselves in the West Bank and Gaza, and enabled mutual recognition between the PLO and the Israel government. In 1995, the Oslo II Accords expanded on the first agreement, which mandated complete withdrawal of Israel from many cities and towns in the West Bank. In 2020, under the Abraham Accords, the UAE and then Bahrain agreed to normalize relations with Israel, making them only the third and fourth countries in the region, following Egypt in 1979 and Jordan in 1994 to do so. Now, where does India picture in the entire issue? Our pragmatic diplomacy in the Israel-Palestine conflict needs a special mention here. India, with its own diplomatic journey, has navigated the complexities of Israel-Palestine conundrum with a pragmatic and an evolving approach, taking into account the changing global dynamics and its own historical context. In 1948, India voted against the UN resolution for Israel's creation, but in 1950, India officially recognized Israel. In 1992, India established full diplomatic ties with Israel, reflecting changing global dynamics. Since then, defense and agriculture formed two main pillars of the bilateral engagement. Despite this, India's support for the Palestinian cause is an integral part of the nation's foreign policy. India has traditionally supported the two-state solution and the right of Palestinian self-determination. In 1974, India became the first non-Arab state to recognize PLO as the sole and legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. In 1996, India opened its representative office to Palestine in the Gaza city, which was later shifted to Ramallah in 2003. Apart from the strong political support to the Palestinian cause, India has been extending various forms of economic assistance to the Palestinian people in the form of development of libraries, student scholarships, technoparks, among others. In this backdrop, India has recently emphasized on the policy of de-hyphenation in its relations with Israel and Palestine. The policy of de-hyphenation emphasizes on separate and independent diplomatic relations with Israel and Palestine based on merit. As we wrap up our journey through the integrated web of the Israel-Palestine conflict, one thing becomes abundantly clear. This is not just a regional dispute, it's a global concern. The threads of religion, politics, and identity have woven a complex narrative, and the path to peace remains elusive. But understanding this history and diplomatic efforts is our first step towards a solution. In a world striving for harmony, it's vital that we continue to untangle this web, one thread at a time, in the hope that someday the web can be replaced with the tapestry of unity.